Hey everybody, this episode of Better Content Everywhere is all about podcasting. Hey everybody, welcome to Better Content Everywhere. This is the podcast that's going to help you create clear, consistent, and compelling content no matter where you're creating. Our digestible and bingeable episodes are going to give you one key learning every single episode in a format that's going to fit right into your schedule. Now, in this episode, we're tackling a question that I hear pretty often, and that is, does my business need a podcast? And the short answer is, of course it does. Yes, your business does need a podcast, but why? Why would you ever need a podcast? It's not like you're looking to become famous, and you're pretty aware that it's not likely that you're going to have hundreds of thousands of fans listening into your podcast about your product or service, but you still need a podcast, and here's why. I'm going to use a baseball analogy. Many of the best teams are built on consistent and stable talent at crucial positions, and in baseball, it's in the middle of the diamond, right? So it's catcher, pitcher, shortstop, and center field. These positions are impacting the greatest number of plays and have the most reach. So similarly, in your business's content strategy, you need a central element that's really going to have wide impact and wide reach. And that's where podcasts are going to come in. Now, just like making it to the major leagues in baseball, there is very low probability that your podcast is going to impress you with the number of downloads or fans it garners. It might, maybe you are the unicorn. But the impact that your podcast is going to have for your business is, in fact, major league. There are three things that make any content succeed, and we know those to be that it must be clear, it must be consistent, and it must be compelling. And a podcast can help you check these boxes in the long run because it requires you to stay on schedule, right? So you're being consistent, and it allows you to leverage a single piece of content into multiple outputs, which is going to reduce the lift on you and your teams to create that new content. A single piece of long-form podcast content can really drive weeks of content for your business. And in today's content-heavy world, you really are missing out if you're not staying in front of those customers and prospects. Now, what if you want to monetize the podcast? Now, we said you're not likely to have hundreds of thousands of followers, but there are other ways that monetizing your podcast might come into play. So while it might not be the primary goal, it is worth noting that successful podcasts can open doors to things like sponsorships, advertising, and some other revenue streams. But first, you really do have to focus on building quality content and a loyal audience. So that's what people are going to pay for. So what next? We've said that your business needs a podcast. What next? Well, number one, you got to start it, right? So first, start. You really don't need the perfect equipment or high-end gear to get going. You can use your phone, your computer, and just get recording, get over the hump. What often holds us back from doing anything is that we think we need all the knowledge and we have to go out and we have to collect everything before we begin. When in fact, we just need to start doing. And we need to use that immediate feedback to learn what's going to work and what really doesn't work. Now, you can't fly completely by the seat of your pants, obviously. You want to have a vision in mind, and you're going to work on your strategy continuously through this process. And then as you go, you're going to quickly dial that in so that you can get to a place where you can really operationalize this project. The second thing, you got to hone it. So as you're learning what works and you're doing these recordings, write down what works. Data from a recent study by the Norwegian University of Science and Technology shows that the act of actually writing your notes by hand improves retention because it increases brain activity across several regions. Now, there's a much more in-depth scientific reason for that, but we're not going to get into it. That's not this podcast, everyone. As you're doing this, keep your North Star in mind. You don't want to veer off track. If you don't have your North Star figured out, you should be driving toward figuring that out with every single episode as you record. And as you narrow your focus, you're going to sharpen your podcast, and that's going to help you really ensure that you can have the impact that you want. So number three, what's the third thing here? You have to operationalize it. You have to be thinking this way. Otherwise, you're going to give up. Put the structure in place for operational efficiency from the very beginning. So every step, consider the journey. For example, consider the journey for guests, right? And automate that scheduling and the booking and the reminders. Get your processes down for show notes and social content and guest thank yous. Now, you can do this as you record and create your content, but don't forget about that. Don't try to fly by the seat every single time you do it, because you're gonna get tired of it and you're gonna give up. Number 4, and this is really important, humanize it. Podcasting is such a personal experience for the listeners, and they really are trying to connect with you if you are the host. So you have to find ways to humanize your guests, and that comes out through really good research. Research your guests, read their books if they have any, and make sure you're referencing those books in the podcast. Do that prep call with the guest and make sure that you're setting the tone of kind of how your show is going to flow and any maybe audience expectations. And make sure, this is an important piece, identify anything that you should not talk about, any no-go topics. That avoids all kinds of awkward conversations that you really don't want to have to record. As you're talking through this stuff, be conversational as a host. Share your own stories. That's going to help you create genuine moments and connect with your listeners. So the other thing we talked about with what makes content successful, it has to be clear. It has to be consistent. So consistency is key here. So if you're going to commit to saying that you're going to be a weekly podcast, stick to it. All right. You have to stick to it. And here are a few tips that you can use to stay on track. Number 1, you have to have an editorial calendar. Create that calendar, and create that calendar. All right. Number 2, you need to get ahead. If you're going week by week and you're trying to stay in front of it, you're going to burn out quickly. So I try to stay at least 4 weeks ahead in recording episodes. And to do that, I really do lean into my third tip, which is batch recording. That means start with 2 or 3 episodes in a day and get those recorded. As your stamina builds, you may be able to knock out 4 or more episodes in a single day, and that's going to free you up tremendously. Keep your podcast clear, consistent, and compelling, and you're going to be able to build a valuable asset for your content strategy. If you've got any questions about any of this, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Like us, rate us, subscribe, do all the things. And until we get to talk again, you have to keep it clear, you have to keep it consistent, and by all means, keep it compelling.